I'm Brian Van, SportbikeTrackGear.com, and today we're going to break down the Motion Pro REV2 quick turn throttle install on our 2018 Suzuki GSX-R1000 R. Okay, so you decided you want to shorten that stock throttle throw, okay? Motion Pro's got a great product for that, this REV2 throttle. There are multiple throttle ratios that are available. There's cams that come with each kit, right? Each one of them has a different throttle pull length, okay? You've got super quick turn short, and you've got something that really mimics stock. On the Suzuki, when you do this project, the throttle housing and the switch pod are incorporated as one unit from the factory. So when you do this, you not only need the REV2 throttle kit, which includes the cables, the housing, the throttle tube, the cams, as well as a pair of grips. I didn't use those. I had some other grips on the bike, but it does come complete with grips. You'll also need this switch, this new start-stop switch. This is a model-specific item. We make it really clear on the website which one's required for which bike. If you have a motorcycle that does not have the start-stop switch built into the throttle housing, it's an independent unit, odds are all you're going to need is the REV2 throttle kit to get your project done. Why would you want to do this? Well, it's really kind of simple. From the factory, most of the motorcycles have a pretty long throttle throw. If you're riding the bike on the racetrack or even very aggressively on the street, it can be beneficial to shorten that up, okay? The less you have to move your wrist, especially if you got any kind of carpal tunnel, hands going on, that kind of stuff, this can help really alleviate that. You don't have to reposition your hand to get to wide open throttle, so this can be super beneficial on the racetrack, especially when you're transitioning from throttle to brakes. It's just a shorter distance, makes it easier to bridge that gap from the throttle to the brakes. As stated earlier, this comes with multiple cams, okay? Varying size. The 50 would be the shortest throw. The second shortest throw I have installed in here right now. It's going to be between the 45 and the 50. It is their RR cam. That cam is special because the initial portion of it is much more progressive. And that's great for like road racing or even real aggressive street riding, where when you've got the bike leaned over in the corner and you need to get back to maintenance throttle, it helps to keep the bike settled, right? The more aggressive cams, when you first turn them on, even that first little move can be a little more aggressive, so the profile of this cam is more favorable for road racing and or very aggressive street riding. As we go through the rest of the cams, like I said, 50, RR, 45, 40, and 35. Per the instructions, Motion Pro recommends, especially if you've not used one of these before, begin with something that's really close to your stock ratio. They show you how to measure your stock cam. That way you can go out and feel it out, because this can be a pretty big and aggressive change. If you've already used a quick turn in the past, you have an idea of what it's going to be like, so you do what's right for you. Replacing this is without a doubt, this is a safety item. The two most important controls on this motorcycle are here and here. You lose either one of those, you're in deep. This is a fairly sizable project. You're going to see with this motorcycle, I'm going to have the fuel tank off. I'm going to take off a little more than you really need to, because I want to have it wide open so you have a great angle to see just what it takes to get this done. If at any point in time you don't feel comfortable with this project, you need to take it to a licensed motorcycle mechanic. Once again, if you make a mistake and this throttle sticks open, that could result in a serious accident, okay? If you don't feel comfortable, licensed mechanic. That is very, very key. I did it myself on my bike. The point of this video is just to show you what I did on my own personal motorcycle. And you'll see throughout this, I'm really careful with the routing of the cables. I lube the cables per the instructions, follow the Motion Pro instructions basically to the letter. They did a great job with that. One thing I want to stress is, and we're going to show you this at the end of the video, before you take the motorcycle out, I want you to sweep the bars back and forth, checking the throttle return at every single position. making sure that it snaps back just as strongly on either side as it does in the center. Also, start the motorcycle, let it idle for a minute, and then sweep the bars back and forth to see if you hear the idle at all change on the motorcycle. If you do, that indicates you've got the cables misadjusted. Stop what you're doing, straighten that out before you ride the bike. If you like what you see so far, you want to have a better idea of what it takes to complete this project, stay tuned. Okay, I've already removed the upper and the lower fairing from the motorcycle as we begin to install our Motion Pro REV2 Throttle kit, okay? That's just about having access, making it easier to show you all what we're doing, okay? You may not have to remove all that on your GSX-R to facilitate this. If you have just street body work on it, what I would recommend doing is at least the fairing over here on the right side, that's gonna have to come off. You may be able to remove the little trim piece here on the right side by the throttle housing to get enough access to remove this. From here, we need to remove the seat and the fuel tank. It's pretty basic stuff here for the seat. Just your two 5mm internal hex fasteners. And we're able to tip that out of the way. Gas tank on the GSX-R1000 is also really easy. Okay. The fuel tank itself, we've got two 5mm internal hex fasteners. They're up here at the front of the tank. What's really cool about this kit is you have all those cams that come with it that you can choose from, and they're easy to install. You can facilitate the installation, the change of the cam right up here at the throttle housing. It's very simple to do, okay? So you can really dial in the ratio that works best for you and your riding style. Got our vent hoses here, bottom of the tank. Got our fuel pump connector. Of course, we have our pressure line. A little difficult to get from this side here. Might have to switch with Steve. Loosen up the safety. Slide it out once you've done that. You might lose just a few drops of fuel, nothing to worry about. Fuel-injected bike will not allow all the fuel to just leak out. Okay, so if you get a couple of drips, you can just clean that up. Got a 10mm wrench here and a 10mm socket on a T-handle. This is the main pivot bolt for the fuel tank. You know, once again, it's hard to find a bike that's easier to work on than a Suzuki, in my opinion. Okay, tank is ready to come off. We'll put this to the side. Okay, we're going to go ahead and remove the airbox from the bike. Got a 10mm hex up here. Back here, okay, you have your fuel line. Got the rail. Go ahead and disconnect that. Pull the lock back. Once again, you're going to lose a little bit of fuel. It's not a big deal. That stuff's just going to evaporate. Need to pull these mounting bolts for that upper fuel rail from the cover of the airbox. Once you've done that, the rail itself will just come loose. Gotta rotate this stuff out of the way like that. I want you to grab hold of this sensor here, and let's just go ahead and just slide that right off that mounting tab like so. Now we have screws that are all around the cover we need to remove, and there are going to be two that are deep down inside here. I'm going to use a number 2 Phillips on these. Here you can use a screw gun on the perimeter screws if you're comfortable doing that, or a hand screwdriver. It really depends on what you're comfortable with. This is a by-wire bike, okay, so even though we're installing a new throttle housing and cables on the bike, actuating the throttle does not open the butterflies, so it reduces the opportunity for things to fall inside the engine. Still not a bad idea to take measures to reduce the possibility of that happening. And we'll cover that as we get this airbox removed from the bike. The reason I'm installing this Motion Pro REV2 throttle is I want to shorten that throttle throw a little bit. It's a pretty big throw. Try and reduce that so I don't have to move my wrist as far. Okay, go ahead and put this aside. Here's where the air filter is located. If you want to do an air filter swap, that's what it takes to get to it. Okay, now the lower portion of this, there are 5mm internal hex fasteners that need to be removed. Grab a T-handle now. We'll run those out. These are captured fasteners. They're going to stay with the lower half of the airbox assembly, right? Actually with the velocity stacks. The reason they do that is in case one of these happens to come loose. By having it captured, it prevents it from finding its way into and past the throttle blades. Okay, we also have the vent here. I want to pull that, like so. Do that before we remove the lower half of that airbox all the way. Okay. So these are all out. Just kind of roll that right out of there. Okay. Like so. I'm going to have over here on this side, disconnect that sensor, find the release tab, push, and pull down. Okay, now you can see, you know, maybe we could have tried to sneak all the throttle cables out without removing as much stuff as we have. When it comes to something like a throttle, I look at it like I would rather do the work to gain enough access to do the job flawlessly than cut corners and create the possibility of that throttle binding due to incorrect routing of the throttle cables. It is so important this is done correctly. That is why I opted to disassemble the bike to this level. Okay, here we go. I just put some tape on there. Just kind of give you a perspective of the stock throttle throw. I mean, that's not horrible, but we want to make that a little quicker. Okay, so hopefully that gives you a little perspective. We'll do this again when we're done. Okay, some parts of this are going to look a little different for you. I've got an aftermarket bar end down there right now. I'm going to thread that out. To be fair, I actually broke that loose off camera because it had a little Loctite in it. I replaced the grips on the bike previously, and I'm just going to reuse that, okay? And the stock throttle tube is pretty unique. Removing this could be a little challenging. That was interesting. Okay, so we're able to preserve that. They do include brand new grips with the Motion Pro REV2 throttle. If you want to use those, go ahead. I'm just going to use the ones that I have now. I like these driven grips. They're a little thicker. That's my preference. Now that we've done this, we're ready to begin disassembling our stock throttle housing. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive in now. Got a Phillips screwdriver here. This screw right here actually retains the cables to the housing. Okay, now we've got the two screws that hold the two halves of the housing together. We're going to take those out. You notice my mood changed? Well, that's because today's golf day, and I just literally heard a downpour start. Dang it. I'll go on record right now and say I am an absolutely horrible golfer. It's kind of embarrassing. I've tarnished the family name out there on the links all year. I may get a break from that today. Okay, and there's another one back here that's more towards the rear of the bike. Once I get this off, I'll be able to really show you clearly where these are both located. We actually just tried to install a G2 Ergonomics quick turn throttle on this bike. We had a customer who ordered one. I think his was an 18 GSX-R1000 as well. And turns out the throttle housing from the 17 to the 18 has changed and it didn't fit. We tried to install it on this bike and I couldn't get it on there either. So that is why we decided to go now with just the full Motion Pro kit. Yeah, my brother went to play early today. He's out there getting his ass soaked. That's right. I'm in here working on my bike. Okay. Screws are out. And that's going to expose now. There's that stock throttle tube, right? Here are the throttle cables. I'm just gonna back this off a little bit. And give me some slack in the cables. Just gonna make moving this a little bit easier here. Slide the cable out of the throttle tube. Like so. Keep all the stock pieces. I highly recommend that. With this motorcycle, the throttle housing and the stop-start switch, okay, they're all one piece. We're going to be losing this. Our hazard light, that's gone. That's okay because we're not riding on the street. There are no lights on the bike, so we don't need our hazards. So in order to do this, you have to buy this kit with their stop-start switch designed specifically for this type of application, along with the REV2 throttle kit. Okay, now we need to unplug the connector. For that, I'm going to first break loose the fastener here. For the retainer for that harness, there's a little 5 internal hex here. The bracket just kind of keeps the cables all neatly arranged. Okay, so take the lower bolt out, allow that to slide out. That's going to go back in. Now if you want to come on over here, Steve, and just get a different vantage point. You can see right here, okay, there is the connector for our switch. Okay, it is right here. So you got the cables, you got the clutch cable. I'm gonna get that connector release depressed and slide that out like so. Okay, there's harness side there, and then we need to get that retainer clip slid out. Okay, now we can fish this out. I think this kind of solidifies my decision to pull the tank right in the airbox. You could have went for it, tried to fish, but I just feel like that's the wrong way. Okay, let's get that released. There we go, like so. Okay, now let's take a really good look at how these cables are routing. All right, you can see they pass through the frame here. Okay, just kind of dip under that clutch cable, and then they route here through this bracket. The one with the white dimple, okay, that is going to be the cable that pulls the throttle blades open, or in this case, actuates the sensor, okay, and that's the one that's on the top. The return cable, it's on the bottom. It's important that you know that and you route it the same way. Go ahead and release both of those from their anchor points. Come back here, we have a Phillips screw. Break that loose, reading the Motion Pro instructions that came with this kit, for this version of the kit, they supply a new screw, so you will not be reusing this OEM screw. Any real finite details like that, always defer to the instructions they include with the kit, because that kind of stuff can change over time. Okay, so we'll just discard this to the side. And we need to release these from the cam. Okay, there's one. And the second one is out now too. Now we can go ahead and pull these through. Really, either direction is going to work, whatever is most convenient for you. One at a time, if that's better. Like so. Okay, before we install the cables on the bike, Motion Pro recommends lubing them. I've already done one. I'm going to show you the other. This is their V3 cable luber. Go ahead and pass that over like so. And the seal. The instructions indicate these are not lubed from the factory. Okay, that's probably pretty normal for any cable. You know, and end of the day here, we want the best possible feel from this, right? So we're going to go ahead and take the time to do this. Thread it in there. Make sure the seal's in position. I do have a drain pan underneath right now to capture the excess. And then here's the Motion Pro cable lube. Get that straw inserted there in the grommet. So essentially what this does, this is a tight seal here, okay? So now when I squeeze this trigger, it forces, and you can hear it down there. It forces the lube down and through the cable. We're just going to lubricate it just until we start to see some excess come out. Now I'll remove the cable lubing tool. We'll clean up all the excess and install the cables for the REV2 kit on the GSX-R1000. Okay. Let's go ahead, and there's a little plastic washer on here. They want you to remove that prior to installation. We're going to do that right now. Here is the screw, and just in case you were curious, the reason they want you to replace it, there's a pretty significant height difference, okay? So important you follow those instructions. Now, the cable that's going to actually be the pull cable is the one without the bracket. Okay, so it's important you understand that when you route these through the frame of the motorcycle. We'll begin doing that right now. I'm going to pass them through the hole in the frame. Pull them back over like so. And pass them through here, like so. Just begin to feed them back a little bit. Okay, the one without the bracket will be ultimately routed on the top. Now we're going to come down here and get these hooked up. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to actually lower the bike down now, and just to get a better visual on this, I'm going to take this apart so we can put the cables on. Okay, here is the bracket. It mounts this to the frame of the motorcycle. If you want to, if you want more access yourself, you know, feel free. Go ahead and just pull this out. It's another bolt, right? Okay. Can unplug it. Can't stress enough that with something like your throttle, how important it is that your final result is 100% perfect, zero binding, everything routed perfectly. Grab just a little multi-purpose grease. I'm just going to go ahead and, I'm talking just the thinnest film ever, right? Just a tiny little bit on here. Okay. How necessary is that? Okay, that's debatable. End of the day. Let's go ahead and get these cables routed. And now the other cable. Let's go ahead and drop that down and through. Make sure it's in the cam just right. Okay, now the bracket. Let's get that bad boy slid up. That kind of dip down a little bit. Like so. And the screw they supplied. Right in there, that is just a Phillips. We're going to use a number 2 Phillips on that. Definitely want to make sure you got this torqued. Get a close up there, Steve. Okay, now we can reinstall this on the motorcycle. Good positive click from that connector. And make sure you route it in there correctly. Grab the fastener. Get that started. Fuel tank rubber here, we'll slide that back on. Okay. Just going to use a quarter drive ratchet to torque this down. Okay, we want to retrieve this little clip here off the end of the OE switch pod harness. Pick in here to release that tab. Okay. Now the Motion Pro connector is designed exactly like that OE one. You can see that slid right in there and locked in place. Okay. Come over to the bike and move this just kind of out of the way now. We're going to do this install with the Oem Clip Ons. I do have a set of Vortex Clip Ons that are going to be going on the bike before I ride it this weekend, but we want to do this install right now with the Oem Clip Ons to see if we have enough gap with the stock handlebars to allow for this installation to happen. So let's grab this and let's route it the same way it was previously. So go ahead and thread that connector through the hole in the frame. All right, we'll find that other end. Let's get this all engaged. And we'll put the harness back in the same location. All right, that's locked in place now. You can see the switch pod still has the wiring for the brake switch. I'm going to go ahead, and it's still hooked up to the master, so we'll go ahead and plug all this stuff in. I'm not sure if I need to leave the switch in there or not for the ABS. I don't know if that is actually necessary for it to function. Nevertheless, for this application, you know, so it's kind of street focused as well as track, we're just going to leave it. There's no need to drill the handlebars, whether you have the factory clip-ons still on the bike or you put a set of aftermarkets on it, to accept the Motion Pro switch or the REV2 throttle housing. They've designed it so that it mounts without having to have any locator holes drilled in the bars. That's kind of a nice little feature there. Makes it a little bit easier, especially with aftermarket clip-ons. That's one of the steps most people hate, is drilling those locator holes, so Motion Pro eliminates the necessity for that. Really like the quality of this switch. Okay. Once we go with the aftermarket clip-ons, we're gonna have a lot more room, okay, to fit all this. This installation is definitely gonna be a little snugger with the factory bars. Okay, switch pod is installed. Okay, the cam I decided to use, I'm going to use that RR cam. This is, you know, in terms of rotation, this is really close to the most aggressive cam, the 50, but it has that progressive start to it. So when you get the bike in a corner, you got it leaned over, right, and you need to get back to the throttle, it's not going to be as abrupt because the first little application doesn't open the throttle as much as the 50 cam would. So we're going to go with the RR. Once again, we've got multiple choices here, okay, to choose from and work with. I'll take these with me to the track, and if I don't like this, I'll switch it out. In the instructions, Motion Pro does recommend going with the one closest to stock and then working up from there so you don't cause an accident, right? That's really up to you. If you've used a quick turn before, that's probably not going to be necessary for you. If you've never experienced one, then maybe with the cams that you start off with, use something that's maybe a step or so up from stock and begin there and see what it feels like. Part of the instructions, make note to lubricating this. I've got just a little bit of grease on the end of this rag. It's very thin film. It's really hardly noticeable, okay, but we lube the cables. We've taken all those steps. We want this to be as smooth as humanly possible, okay? Lots of feel is what we're shooting for here. Okay, also I've just got an old Phillips screwdriver here that I kind of ground the end off of. A little bit of that same multi-purpose grease, very thin film on the back side of the throttle tube. Okay, so I'm going to do that too. The cam and the tube will go together like so, and these are realistically, they're not held together until they are inside that throttle housing, okay? For now, I'm going to slide them together like this, roll them over, and we need to get the throttle cables onto the cam so we can put the halves of the housing on it. Okay, now let's go ahead and let's get the throttle cables over the cam. Okay, let's get them attached to the cam. I'm going to start with the pull cable. That clipped in place, make sure that's just right. Kind of rotate it around, and then our return, same thing. Okay, let's go ahead and slide the two cables together right here. Like so. Be a little tricky, okay, so take your time with that. Get them both lined up, just like that. That's an important step. because if they're not hooked up or attached properly, you're going to have a difficult time with the housing, okay? So get the throttle tube back in there. Now the halves of that housing. Slide this over, like so. That slides in there, and there's actually a slot for that to ride in. Now the other half here, and this is actually where your throttle stop is. It's on this half here. Slide this over. Okay, make sure everything is lined up correctly. I'm going to grab the two fasteners. Get those started. .4mm internal hex. Now slide this up into position. It's really important. This is going to need to be all the way up against, with the Oem Clip Ons, all the way up against that switch pod so you have enough clearance here at the end. We'll get both of these just kind of run down. Not putting any real torque to them yet. Kind of getting the fastener seated. And tighten the top one first, and then we'll apply some final torque to the one here at the bottom. Once we've done that, I'm going to grab this cover and slide it over, like so. That'll hold the halves together. I'm actually going to loosen it just a little bit now. I've got a little pressure on that cable. I want to rotate it back just a touch. Okay, just until, definitely want to have clearance here with that switch. Might want to try and rotate that just a little bit. That looks pretty good there. So we'll tighten the upper one again. And then finish with the lower. Okay, right now everything feels good. We're going to check that throttle return a number of times until we really get it totally dialed in. So we've got some more steps to finish here. One really important step is once I get the bike reassembled, I need to get it off the table because I need to be able to sweep the handlebars back and forth to make sure we have a good, strong throttle return. Okay, now it's time to put the grips on. I like to use grip glue. Not everybody else digs that. I'll show you how I'm going to try and something new I want to try just to keep the glue from getting under the throttle tube. I'm not sure if this is actually going to work or not. Just taping up just the very end there. I'm going to reuse the same grips. I mean, I literally just put them on at the beginning of the season. They look great. No reason to replace them right now. I'm going to go ahead and drizzle some grip glue down inside the grip. I like to use that same tool to just kind of spread it around evenly. Let's get it lined up. Okay, I want to make sure I'm all the way over, not too close to the housing, right? Because if you get too close to the housing, it can grab the housing and stick. I'll wipe off the excess there. Now we'll take the electrical tape off. Just kind of roll that off. I'll safety wire these grips on the tube as well. Before the glue is dry, I want to get this thing positioned. So I'm happy with it. Little piece of safety wire. We'll do this on each end of the grip. These driven Superbike grips that I'm using here, that I'm reusing. Remember, this kit comes complete with a set of Motion Pro grips. So this is just a grip that I've used for a long time and I really prefer it. Trim that edge. I'll also bend those around and really tuck it in the grip tightly so that I don't feel it. Okay. So once again, make sure the grip there's nothing under it. It actually feels really good. So we're just gonna kind of let that chill out for right now. Okay, before I start to put the airbox back together, I'm just gonna go ahead and burn this off. Make sure there's nothing that could have laid on top of those throttle blades. Now we'll get the lower portion of our airbox ready. Go back in. We've got the sensor over here to plug in. And once we do that, we can dip this back in. Make sure fuel line back there. You gotta get the air ducts lined up with the cutouts in the frame. And get all the velocity stacks lined up, front mount. We'll just get each one of these started before we put any torque to them. And once you get them all started, I'll just run them each down, just finger tight, get them seated, and then I'll run over each one of them, make sure there's good even torque. Okay, here is the air filter. Let's go ahead and just get that in position. That's held down by the actual upper portion of the airbox itself. Make sure the two screws are in the center holes here. I usually just leave those there. And we'll drop this bad boy on. Get it lined up. Put all the screws in. Mount up the upper fuel rail. This is pretty vanilla stuff here. Okay. I don't think we're going to show much of this. You know, if you're tackling this project, you sure as hell better be able to put your airbox back together. This whole throttle thing, I mean, I can't stress enough, this is a big, big safety issue. If you do this wrong, if your cables are binding, if you've, created issues, it's very serious, no bullshit. Bodily harm is quite possible, okay? Steve's actually watched me toil over some of this stuff, and we don't show every little bit. I spend some time mocking these things up, like the way that I pass these cables through here, how they're on this side of the brake reservoir. I spent a lot of time mocking that up to make sure that that was going to be the right way. And I would encourage you, whether you have this model or another model, to do the same thing. Really take your time with this. I'm just going to start each one of these by hand, then we're going to bolt down that fuel rail. And then I'll grab my screw gun and just zip them down. When we come back, we'll be ready to button up the bike, get the bodywork back on, move it off the table, and we'll check the sweep of the bars to make sure that the throttle return is good, and we'll get the cables all dialed in. Okay, so before we even adjust the cables, what I want to do is let's just sweep the bars, and I'm looking at the wiring for the switch. That's new. Clearance there all looks good. May actually secure this to the fork tube or something, but for now that looks good. We are going to do some clip-ons tomorrow, so some of this will change. And now let's check the throttle return. At all positions, feels great. Okay, now slacken the throttle. I mean, you can clearly see right there that is excessive. We're going to start by lengthening the pole cable, okay? Let's go ahead and, so we've dramatically reduced that. Okay, now, always checking that return. It was really smooth. Let's go ahead and just tighten that jam nut. Love the quality of the cables. Motion Pro does obviously a fantastic job with the cables, even after you tighten the jam nut. Let's check it out again. Everything feels fantastic. Now for the return cable, okay? Just gonna tweak this one just a little bit. And on this bike, I can actually feel down here, feel that cam that's there with the TPS sensor. Feel how much slack there is in it. All right, that actually right there, just very tiny adjustment here. Go ahead and hit that jam. Okay. Slide the tubes up. Now let's go ahead and once again check that throttle return at the sweep. And we have one less step. We're going to start the bike and see if the throttle picks up when we rotate the handlebars from side to side at all. Okay, now let's start the bike, and this is also going to allow us to check this switch we installed. I still have a key on the bike, so we're going to key on. The kill switch is off when it's depressed, and when it's all the way out, it is connected. Starter button. Another test of the kill switch. That indicates that is wired up, working perfectly. Starter button obviously works. And you notice when I swept the bars back and forth, the throttle didn't pick up at all. There was no change in RPM. That's really, really important. I cannot stress enough. Double check, triple check, quadruple check that the throttle cables return properly and that the throttle does not pick up when you sweep the bars back and forth. Okay, so we showed you the stock throw, and this is not the most aggressive cam, okay? This is a few degrees away from the most aggressive. This is the RR cam. There's your difference. Without looking at the other video footage, seat of the pants, I'm gonna say that's shorter. And with the RR cam, remember, you have that profile where the initial input of the throttle, right, is less aggressive. So when you get the bike over in the corner and you first turn it on, it's not gonna unsettle it as much. You are giving away a few degrees of opening, right? The 50 mil cam will open it with less motion, but it's only a couple of degrees. So I'm gonna give this one a shot. And I'll of course take all the rest with me, and at the track, play with them and see which one I like the best.